Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. How often do you use WhatsApp? Chances are every hour of every day. And if so, we have news for you. WhatsApp is threatening to leave India. The company is fighting a legal battle against the government of India. At the center of it is encryption. If WhatsApp loses the case, they could leave India. That's what they've said. So what exactly is this lawsuit? Is WhatsApp serious about leaving? And how will it affect the Indian users? We'll tell you all about it. Meanwhile, the war in West Asia continues. Saudi Arabia is now planning a peace summit. We'll tell you who is invited and what's at stake. Also, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited China. He got a meeting and a warning from Xi Jinping. In Europe, a dire warning from Emmanuel Macron. The French president says Europe could die. Why did he say this? And what's his suggested treatment? In the US, campus protests for Gaza continue. The focus is now on the high-handedness of the police. Also in the US, Vice President Kamala Harris had an interesting guest. She welcomed reality TV star Kim Kardashian for a conversation on criminal justice reform. And in the world of AI, there is now a pageant. Who will be the next Miss AI? How will the contest even work out? All this and more lined up. The headlines first. The Indian Supreme Court rejects pleas seeking 100% cross-verification of votes cast using electronic voting machines with a paper audit. It also declined a petition to bring back paper ballots. The orders came on the day the country voted in the second phase of the general election. India seeks Vijay Mallya's extradition from France, according to a new report. New Delhi wants the fugitive businessman to be extradited without any preconditions. Mallya is accused in a $1 billion bank loan default case. He left India in March 2016. American troops to leave Chad. It comes just days after Washington agreed to remove forces from neighboring Niger. Around 100 US troops are stationed in the Central African nation. Earlier this month, Chad had asked the US military to halt its activities at an airbase near the capital. ByteDance says it has no plans to sell TikTok. Washington wants the Chinese tech giant to sell it or get banned in the US. American lawmakers have voiced security concerns over the short video app, but TikTok denies allegations of sharing US user data with China. And candidates champion D. Gukesh speaks to Firstpost. The Indian chess grandmaster credits his parents for his success. It's a Firstpost exclusive.
From a very young age, my mom used to be. We used to talk about a lot of mental stuff, and she used to tell me all the epics, and all the like Ramayana, Mahabharata, and all the great stories.
Will WhatsApp leave India? It might sound unimaginable to you. After all, WhatsApp is everywhere. More than 400 million Indians use it every month. We conduct business over WhatsApp, speak to family and friends, plan meetings and trips. So life without WhatsApp may sound impossible. But a new case could change all of that. In 2021, the government of India published new IT rules. Every social media company has to follow these rules. But one provision is being challenged. WhatsApp has taken the matter to the Delhi High Court. It was their lawyer who issued this warning. He said in court that WhatsApp could leave India. So what exactly is this provision in the IT rules and why is it so controversial? The IT rules talk about the first originator of information. Say there's a piece of fake news or a hate message on WhatsApp. Under the IT rules of India, WhatsApp must trace where this message came from, who drafted it first. And this person or account is called the first originator. Now, who can force WhatsApp to do this? Any court or competent authority. The idea is to ensure that fake news does not cause trouble. that the real culprits are traced and punished. But WhatsApp has flagged an issue. The messages you send on WhatsApp are encrypted, so only two people can read them, the sender and the receiver. Not even WhatsApp knows what you have sent, so the company says we cannot follow these IT rules. To find the originator, we must break encryption, and breaking encryption equals breaking privacy. At least that's what WhatsApp is saying. What about the government of India? In the past, the IT ministry has rejected this argument. They say the likes of WhatsApp already mine user data, so they cannot claim to be guardians of privacy. Well, it's a fair point. But the question is, will the court agree? Similar petitions have been filed across the country. All of them have been clubbed together at the Delhi High Court. They will start hearing the case in the month of August. Now, this is a very complicated issue. On the one hand, you have the right to privacy. The Supreme Court has said it's a fundamental right. On the other, you have national interest. What if fake news affects public order? What if it leads to social unrest? What if it targets children? Surely there must be accountability. Courts have said that fundamental rights are not absolute. There must be reasonable curbs. The question is, do the IT rules satisfy that yardstick, or does the risk outweigh the benefit? That's one question the courts must consider. Secondly, do other countries do something like this? The judge put this question to WhatsApp's lawyer. He said, there is no such rule anywhere else in the world. Some countries did try, like the FBI in the United States. They asked Apple to unlock iPhones belonging to suspects, but Apple denied. It led to a huge legal showdown in the US. So India's rules are one of a kind, which is why it was always going to be a very consequential lawsuit. And WhatsApp has just raised the stakes. Let me quote from what their lawyer said. This is the WhatsApp lawyer. He said, as a platform, we are saying, if we are told to break encryption, then WhatsApp goes. We will have to keep a complete chain of messages, and we don't know which ones will be asked to be decrypted. It means millions and millions of messages will have to be stored for a number of years. So WhatsApp is building a strong case, and they're looking to fight this out. The question is, what happens next? Let's assume that the court sides with the government of India. It says WhatsApp must break encryption. Then the company has two choices. One, it can comply with the order, but chances are it will open the floodgates. Countries across the world will then draft similar laws, and they too will ask WhatsApp to break encryption. And if it's WhatsApp today, it could be Apple and others next. Which brings us to the second choice for WhatsApp, the choice to leave India. But will WhatsApp really abandon its biggest market? They make around $1 billion from India. Can the company just walk away from that? Like I said, the stakes are pretty high in this case. Courts and governments around the world will be watching this. Let's turn to West Asia now. Israel is preparing for the final stage of its war, a ground assault on Rafah. But what happens after that? What will post-war Gaza look like? Reports say Saudi Arabia could play a role in deciding that. The kingdom is hosting a key meeting on Monday. It will bring together multiple stakeholders like the United States, the United Kingdom, the European Union, Jordan, Egypt, Qatar, and the Palestinian Authority. They'll all be there for the meeting, but no Hamas and no Israel. These countries will be represented by their foreign minister. So Antony Blinken will be flying down on Monday. But what is the agenda here? What are they hoping to achieve? Some officials are calling it a crisis meeting. The idea is to get a broad picture of post-war Gaza. Who will fund the reconstruction? Who will administer the Gaza Strip? And what role will Israel play? These are some of the possible questions on the table, and no one is expecting concrete results. But the meeting itself is symbolic. Why? Because it's happening in Saudi Arabia. So far, the kingdom has stayed on the sidelines. They have criticized Israel, but we haven't really seen any initiatives. Iran's proxies have done the fighting. Qatar and Egypt have hosted the peace talks. Saudi Arabia was more like the family elder, important but silent. So what role can Riyadh play now? There are two sides to this. The first is a short-term role. Gaza is facing acute food shortage. United Nations agencies say a famine could set in by 6 weeks. So Gaza needs a lot of aid and they need it fast. Plus, reconstruction will require a lot of money. The United Nations says it will cost $20 billion, the reconstruction of Gaza. Egypt says it will cost $90 billion. So Saudi money will be necessary. The kingdom is the largest economy in the Arab world, also the natural leader of Muslim nations. So Riyadh's voice will carry weight. That's the short-term role. In the long term, Riyadh will play a role in the two-state solution. And their position is quite clear. Create a Palestinian state and we will fund Gaza's reconstruction. If not, do not count on us. And honestly, it makes sense. Assume Saudi Arabia funds Gaza's reconstruction, there is no two-state solution, 10 years pass by, there is yet another flare-up and Israel flattens Gaza again. So Riyadh now wants assurances. Assurances that Palestine will get statehood. The question is, will Israel agree to it? Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is a Palestine hawk. He's made a career out of rejecting the two-state solution. Recent events have only hardened his position. Listen to his statement from February this year. This is what Netanyahu said. Israel categorically rejects international dictates regarding a permanent settlement with the Palestinians. Israel will continue to oppose unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state. That's what the Israeli Prime Minister said. The United States has the same policy. They do want a two-state solution, but they want Israel to agree to it. Enter Saudi Arabia. It is the biggest prize for Israel's leadership. If Riyadh recognizes Israel, it could set off a chain reaction. Other Muslim nations could do the same. And do not forget the economic potential. Saudi Arabia's money plus Israel's technology. Together, it could reshape West Asia. It could also seal Netanyahu's legacy. He wouldn't be the man who allowed October 7th to happen. He would be the man who forged friendship with Saudi Arabia. It sounds a lot better, doesn't it? So Riyadh does have leverage here. But it's also a political minefield for them. Globally, Muslim sentiment has turned against Israel. So recognizing them during or after the war will be quite risky. Which brings us to the United States. Riyadh has a wish list for the US. Some security guarantees, extra military aid, and assistance for a nuclear program. That's what the Saudis want. If Biden agrees to this, Saudi Arabia could go ahead. Hence the meeting on Monday. It's the right time for these conversations. But a lot will depend on Israel's actions in the coming days. They are moving in on Rafah. So despite all the warnings, an invasion now looks imminent, and that could shape the Arab world's decision. A bloodbath in Rafah would be too hard to ignore. It could bury or at least delay the chances of a stable West Asia. And speaking of stability, the US is looking for some with China. Before his trip to Saudi Arabia, Antony Blinken traveled to China. He was looking for a diplomatic opening. He did not have much luck, though. Today, he met Chinese President Xi Jinping, and this is what he was told.
The two countries should be partners, not rivals. Mutually gain achievements, not hurt each other. Both countries should seek common ground while reserving differences instead of vicious competition. Both sides should keep their word instead of saying one thing and doing another.
Don't say one thing and do another. That's what Xi Jinping told Antony Blinken. Now, if you want to look at the glass half full, you could say at least the meeting happened because Xi doesn't usually meet a lot of visiting diplomats. So Blinken secured a meeting. But he also got a cold reception. On his agenda, on Antony Blinken's agenda, there were two key items: improving military-to-military contact and easing travel between the US and China. That's what he wanted to focus on. But Beijing had a different plan. Instead of dwelling on these issues, China told Blinken about its red lines. Listen to this.
We always call for respecting each other's core interests and urge the United States not to interfere in China's internal affairs, not to hold China's development back, do not interfere with China's sovereignty, safety, development, and not to step on China's red lines on China's sovereignty.
That's Wang Yi, China's foreign minister. He asked the US to choose between stability or a downward spiral. And what are China's red lines? South China Sea and Taiwan. Two major flashpoints in the Indo-Pacific where the US and China are locking horns. Just this week, before Blinken arrived in China, the United States approved fresh military aid for Taiwan. Plus, American forces have started military drills with the Philippines. Now, this is a clear challenge to China. The US is not just stepping on Chinese red lines, it is obliterating them. And Blinken gave no indication that they'll back off, although he did say that they want to keep talking to China.
At the very least, to avoid misunderstandings, to avoid miscalculations. That really is a shared responsibility that we have, not only for our own people, but for people around the world.
Expecting China to behave responsibly is being too optimistic. China has a reputation of disregarding all established rules of engagement. And now they have another axe to grind, the impending ban on TikTok in the United States. There are also growing tensions over Russia. The US accuses China of fueling Russia's war machine. In fact, Antony Blinken raised this point blank in the meeting.
I reiterated our serious concern about the PRC providing components that are powering Russia's brutal war of aggression against Ukraine.
Safe to say Beijing did not relent. Instead, it could be planning to double down and boost its support to Russia. Because next month, Vladimir Putin will visit China, most likely right after his inauguration. Remember, Putin just won an election, a record 5th term in office. In a few days from now, he will take the oath of office, and his first overseas visit could be to China. What's on Putin's agenda? Defense supplies. Reports say Beijing is selling a large number of machine tools, microelectronics and other parts to Russia's defense manufacturers. This equipment is being used to boost production of missiles, tanks, aircraft and other weapons. So what Putin wants from China is dual-use components. This is equipment that can serve both civilian and military purposes, hence the term dual-use. And China may be open to supplying these to Russia, which makes the thaw with America even more unlikely. Have you noticed how politicians end their speech? It varies from country to country. In the US, they say, God bless America. In India, they say, Jai Hind, meaning Hail India. In France, they say, Vive la France. And in Saudi Arabia, they praise God and his Prophet Muhammad. Different words, but same sentiment. A nod to greatness, a hope that your country and culture lives forever. But Emmanuel Macron has chosen a different route. On Thursday, he delivered a speech in Paris. He outlined his vision for the European Union. But Macron did not praise or hail Europe. Instead, he warned that Europe could die.
Paul Valéry said at the end of the First World War that we knew from now that our civilizations were mortal. We have to be clear about the fact that our Europe today is mortal. It could die. It could die, and that depends solely on our choices.
Europe could die. It's a scary thing for anyone to say, more so for Europe's senior-most leader to say. So why did President Macron say it? What was he referring to? Well, broadly, two things. First was the war in Ukraine. Macron called it the biggest threat to European security. And second, Europe's strategic position. Macron said the EU is losing relevance. It is too dependent on others. In fact, let me quote from that speech. This is what the French president said. The European Union bought its energy and fertilizer from Russia, outsourced its production to China, and depended on the US for its security. It's hard to argue with that. Europe has done exactly that in the last few decades. But Macron says no more. He wants Europe to be independent, to show the world that the EU is not a US vassal.
We must continue to have partnerships with other countries. Yes, meaning building a Europe that can show that it is never the vassal of the United States of America, and it also knows how to speak to all regions in the world, to emerging countries, to Africa, Latin America.
A couple of questions here. One, why is Macron talking about this now? And what does he propose to do? Macron has always spoken about a close-knit Europe. He once called for a European army, so the sentiment itself is not new. If anything, it's more relevant today. Across the Atlantic, Donald Trump is leading the US presidential race. He is a known NATO skeptic. If he wins, he will not support Ukraine or European security, not the way Biden does. So Europe must prepare for a Trump White House. Plus, the EU itself is going through a churn. European Parliament elections are in June this year. Polls show right-wing parties making gains. They may not get a majority, but this could be the most right-wing EU Parliament in history, which means less support for Ukraine, less engagement in NATO, and a possible reset with Russia. Even Macron is feeling the heat. Polls show that his party is trailing the right wing in France, in his country. So the president had to do something. And what better than an alarmist call? But does he have any concrete proposals? Macron did mention a few ideas. He's dropped his call for a European army, but now he wants to create a European military academy. He also wants a continent-wide missile shield, sort of like an Iron Dome for Europe. Then he wants closer cooperation with Britain and finally more investment in the European defense industry. That last one is very important. In the last 5 years, around 55% of European arms imports came from one country, and that is the United States. In 5 years before that, it was only 35%. So Europe's dependence on the US has increased, and Macron wants to reverse that. He says the EU must be able to go to war without America. And how do you do that? By making your own weapons. France and Germany are pushing on with a new deal. Together, they will make battle tanks by 2040. On paper, this is all very good. Every country is aiming to be self-sufficient, so Macron wants the same for Europe. But there's a problem. Europe is not a country, you see. There are 27 members in the European Union. Many of them do not see eye to eye. They cannot agree on subsidies and tech laws. Good luck getting an agreement on missile shields. Plus, Macron is talking about a major realignment. Europe has spent 70 years in America's shadows. Their defense, their foreign policy, their strategy, all of it was influenced by Washington. So abandoning that will take time and investment. Nonetheless, the French president has openly called for it. It's now up to his fellow EU members to respond. Will they agree to this painful reorientation, or will they stick to the status quo? The elections in June could answer that question. Our next story is about Tesla, a company whose mention used to spark excitement among both customers and investors. But I guess that was in the past. Now Tesla is on a bumpy road. It has just reported its worst results in years, and that has cast a shadow on its India plans. There's a lot of speculation after Elon Musk's visit was cancelled. Is this just a delay, or are those plans on hold? Tesla is yet to clarify. They've not committed to setting up a manufacturing plant in India. There's no movement really on charging stations. Tesla is yet to approach suppliers or any state government for that matter. Basically, no groundwork has begun. Elon Musk was supposed to be here last weekend to meet Prime Minister Modi. There was anticipation around the visit, a possible announcement of Tesla's entry into India, but he called it off at the last moment, citing, and I quote, very heavy Tesla obligations. Since then, the company has not said much about its India plans, but it has made other announcements, and that is adding to the confusion. 3 days ago, Tesla called off plans to build more factories. Why? It says it does not need new manufacturing lines and that the existing factories can make more cars. So if Tesla expands, its existing factories will be used. They will supply vehicles to the new markets. In other words, it will be importing cars from overseas, not building them locally, and investors seem to be happy about this. They believe that new production lines increase Tesla's risk. With this approach, not having new factories, Tesla can service new markets without any dramatic escalation in cost. That's how the investors see it. But what does it mean for India? Will the government of India be on board with this plan? Tesla cannot just start importing cars here. If it wants to sell in India, it will have to fulfill certain conditions. The first condition is investment. Tesla needs to commit at least $500 million in India. The second condition is domestic manufacturing. Within 3 years, Tesla must start making cars in India. Without meeting these conditions, Tesla will not be able to avail any concessions, especially the discount on import tariffs, something that Elon Musk is said to have pushed for. The new import tax is 15%, Earlier, it was up to 100%. So from 100 to 15, there's been a steep cut. But Tesla can avail this discount only when it meets India's conditions. And this presents a challenge for Elon Musk. Because Tesla sales are down. Profits have collapsed by 55%. Their margins are reducing. They've slashed the prices of cars to boost sales. Only expansion into new markets can solve their problems. But for that to happen, they'll have to spend some money. In fact, to enter a market like India, Tesla needs more than a car factory. It needs facilities to build batteries, an entire network of charging stations. In the US, for instance, Tesla has 6 battery factories. They're called gigafactories. What about charging stations? Tesla has around 2,000 of them, 2,000 charging stations in North America alone. They're called superchargers. Tesla claims that these superchargers can add a mileage of over 300 kilometers with just a 15-minute charge. If Tesla wants to extend the same level of service in India, it will have to invest. Plus, this is a highly price-sensitive market. The cheapest Tesla car today costs almost $40,000. That's 33 lakh Indian rupees. This is too steep for mass penetration in a market like India. Local EV manufacturers are already undercutting Tesla. They're selling cars for as low as $17,000. If Tesla is serious about India, it cannot rely on its brand name alone. It needs a strategy that is unique to India, something that is clearly missing right now. In the United States, the pro-Gaza protest continues. It started at one university. It has now reached 24. Students want justice for Palestinians. But there are also reports of anti-Semitism. Classes have been disrupted. Commencement ceremonies have been cancelled. Some very dramatic images and strong statements have come out. But what really stands out is the police brutality. American cops are cracking down on students using tear gas and rubber bullets, pushing protesters to the ground. If it were any other country, we know the moral lectures that would have come from the United States. But since this is the United States, the world is expected to understand. Our next report tells you more.
Columbia, Harvard, NYU, Yale, Emerson, Georgetown and Emory. These are America's top colleges, but they're also America's top protest spots right now. It started with Columbia, but it has since spread from coast to coast. Students are camping on the grounds. Classes are suspended. In some cases, commencement ceremonies will now be online. The protests call for a permanent ceasefire. They want the US to stop giving aid to Israel. The universities have disagreed that there are accusations of anti-Semitism. But what stands out is the heavy-handedness of the police. That was the University of Texas. The students were protesting. Police reached the campus. Scuffles broke out. And soon, videos showed police pushing protesters to the ground. The university hasn't commented on it, neither have the police. But media reports say several were arrested. And this is the picture everywhere. Violent police brutality. The police are clashing with students. They are tearing down tents. They are breaking phones. They are using tear gas. They are arresting protesters.
That they've put all of these students through so much violence, so much psychological trauma. Many of our students now are afraid to come back to campus because the last time they were on campus, they experienced violent police brutality. So I think this university has truly traumatized numerous students and still refuses to even acknowledge and is now once again threatening police sweeps against our student body.
In Emory, they even used rubber bullets against protesters. Those arrested were pushed down to the ground. In Texas, troopers used their bikes to push back the students. If this was happening anywhere else, you can imagine the headlines. Police brutality at student protests. Police using force on students. Police showing heavy-handedness. There would be widespread condemnation. There would be moral lectures. There would be articles about the erosion of democracy. But in the land of the hypocritical, also known as the United States of America, the rules change depending on geography.
If someone, for example, is being attacked, we're going to go into Columbia University as we would to a private home to help protect that person. But absent exigency, absent some ongoing crime, we cannot just go on the Columbia campus as we see fit. It is up to the university to decide whether or not they want us on campus.
The protests are unlikely to end anytime soon. There have been negotiations, class cancellations, even crackdowns, but it only continues to snowball. Right now, it's spread to at least 24 universities, and there could be more in the days to come. So the United States would do well to stop playing pretend peacemaker and douse the fires at home first.
Our next story is also from the US. It's about their former President Donald Trump. He's been quite busy lately with a slew of legal cases. Trump has been accused of everything, really, from election interference to paying hush money to an adult actor. But while he deals with all these legal problems, his advisors are already planning ahead. They're formulating policies for when Trump returns to the White House. That is their hope. And a new report tells us what they're working on. Trump's advisors want to punish some countries that want to de-dollarize. We've spoken to you about this before, about de-dollarization, but here's a brief overview. Today, the US dollar is the most important currency in the world. It's the world's reserve currency, the currency all countries hoard to protect national wealth. About 60% of the world has savings tied to the US dollar. These are called dollar-dominated assets. And what does this mean in practical terms? It means that the US has unreasonable control over the world's economy. We trade with the US dollar, we save using the US dollar, and we're all forced to track the US dollar to make sure we don't suffer because of American policies. It's a system where we depend on the US for our own financial stability. So what's the solution? De-dollarization, moving away from this excessive dependence on the US dollar. Some countries have been trying to do this or thinking about it, making small but defiant moves. Like India using the rupee to buy oil from the UAE, or Argentina using the Chinese yuan to pay off a loan. These were moves to reduce dependency on the US dollar and help currencies from the global south rise in value. This is de-dollarization in a nutshell. But obviously, the US does not like that. If de-dollarization begins in earnest, the US will start losing its clout, and Donald Trump is not a fan of that idea. He gave an interview recently. I'll quote from what he said. "I hate when countries go off the dollar. I would not allow countries to go off the dollar because when we lose that standard, that will be like losing a revolutionary war. That will be a hit to our country." It doesn't get clearer than that. Trump wants everyone to stay hooked to the US dollar, and now his advisors are working to make this possible. They're planning punishments and sanctions for anyone who does not toe this line. And India is in their crosshairs. Along with Brazil, Russia, China, and South Africa, the BRICS countries basically, they have caught Trump's eye. His advisors are planning to target BRICS for what was discussed last year during the last summit in South Africa. That was last August. The BRICS countries spoke about creating a new common currency, a currency to be used among BRICS member nations for trade and investments. This new BRICS currency was supposed to be a hedge, a protection against the US dollar. It sounds like a smart, pragmatic move, a way to defend national interest. It's an interesting idea, but it's nowhere near becoming a reality. There are some very obvious security issues like sharing a currency with China, so the BRICS currency is still a pipe dream. Despite this, it seems Trump and his team feel threatened, as though this BRICS currency is an attack on the supremacy of the US dollar. So it seems they're planning a counterstrike. And what would that look like? The options include export controls, currency manipulation charges, and tariffs. Let me explain. Export controls restrict free trade. They prevent a country from accessing some goods or technologies, like what the US does with China. It prevents Beijing from accessing advanced computer chips. That's an export control. Trump may expand export controls to countries that want de-dollarization. Then we have currency manipulation charges. They're a more subtle attack. A country can be branded a currency manipulator. It will affect your reputation, your currency may be shunned, and it could lose value. Then we come to tariffs, the simplest form of punishment. Trump may put tariffs on goods from a country, like an additional import tax. It makes an imported product more expensive for American customers if there's more tariff, meaning the demand will go down because the product has become more expensive and the country's trade suffers. Trump and his advisors want to impose these punishments on BRICS countries for daring to try and replace the dollar. It's pure mob behavior. Use our currency or else. India may be spared though. New Delhi and Washington are close allies after all. But this whole episode is distasteful. You cannot force anyone to depend on you. You have to let them make their own way. If not, you aren't an ally. You're just a big bully. Speaking of bullies, let's turn to China. And this is about India's neighbors, 3 of them in particular, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and a constant headache, that is China. Beijing is making moves in South Asia. It is trying to cozy up to India's other neighbors. It is reaching out to Bangladesh's military. For the first time ever, China and Bangladesh will conduct joint military drills. The exercise is called Golden Friendship 2024. Since China is known for its death trap diplomacy, this name reeks of irony. The drills will begin next month. Meanwhile, China is also courting India's southern neighbor, that is Sri Lanka. They're expecting a record Chinese investment. Beijing plans to build a $4.5 billion oil refinery with a domestic focus apparently. This is a direct challenge to Indian investment plans, and it shows how Beijing keeps undermining New Delhi. Here's our report.
In early May, China will be sending troops to Bangladesh. No, China isn't starting another territorial dispute. This time, the troops have been invited. They are going to Bangladesh for joint military drills, codenamed China-Bangladesh Golden Friendship 2024. China has been investing heavily in Bangladesh. Beijing has spent $25 billion across a number of projects. China has sent Bangladesh tanks, fighter jets, and submarines as well. It's been investing in every part of Bangladesh's defense: land, air, and sea. So, as a reward, Dhaka has finally allowed Chinese troops to visit. A contingent will take part in the Golden Friendship exercises. These are the first ever China-Bangladesh joint drills. So, what will they be doing? Apparently, practicing counter-terrorism scenarios. Chinese media has given 2 examples: rescuing hostages from hijacked buses and cleaning up terrorist camps. China says this is to deepen practical exchanges and cooperation. Now, China probably won't send troops if a Bangladeshi bus gets hijacked. And as far as terror camp cleanups are concerned, China has been friends with Pakistan for a long time. So, terror cleanups aren't exactly their specialty. These drills are just the latest example of the China-Bangladesh military ties. But Dhaka should be wary, because Chinese gold can transform into never-ending debt before you know it. Just look at Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka had a financial meltdown in 2022. They defaulted on a foreign debt payment. The economy crashed. People took to the streets. They ousted the president. It was chaos. And partly to blame were Chinese loans. It was a classic example of Chinese debt trap diplomacy. But it seems Sri Lanka has forgotten those lessons.
China accepted Sri Lanka's future progress and development, new areas of cooperation. Hambantota port is at the tip of our country. Beyond Hambantota port, it is the Indian Ocean and no other country, no other island, right down to the South Pole. Please remember. So Sri Lanka also looked forward and developed Hambantota.
That was Sri Lanka's Prime Minister, Dinesh Gunawardene. He was in China last month, inviting more Chinese investments. One such investment will affect the Hambantota port. It's Sri Lanka's second largest port, and China controls it. The port was leased to China for 99 years. This port will be getting some China-funded upgrades. China's state-run oil refiner, Sinopec, plans to build a refining plant in the port complex. It'll cost $4.5 billion to set up. Now, India was planning to build a fuel pipeline that would go to Sri Lanka, directly supply the country with Indian fuel. So, is this Chinese refinery being built for the people of Sri Lanka or to undermine India? At every turn, China is courting India's neighbours, showering them with gifts and then bankrupting them with debt. New Delhi should keep an eye out, or it might find itself surrounded by countries beholden to Beijing.
Have you heard of Kim Kardashian? She's a reality star turned influencer turned businesswoman. If you're on social media, chances are you know about her. She started with a reality TV show and ended up building an entire empire. Her story is that of modern-day branding, using social influence to create a brand. But now she's expanding it. She's using her influence elsewhere. Today, Kim Kardashian was invited to the White House for a round table with Vice President Kamala Harris. The discussion was on criminal justice reform. How does Kim Kardashian feature in this? Because it's a cause that she's taken up. She's become a vocal activist for it. Podcasts, documentaries, meetings with policymakers, visiting prisoners. Kim Kardashian has done it all. The most famous example is from 2018. When Donald Trump was the US president, he met with Kim Kardashian. They discussed the case of Alice Johnson, a 63-year-old woman who was given a life sentence for a non-violent drug offense. Trump granted her clemency, and she was soon out of prison. It's one of the many cases that Kim Kardashian has rallied for, and now she's back at the White House to push for reform.
Everybody makes mistakes, and for some that might rise to the level of being a crime. But is it not the sign of a civil society that we allow people a way to earn their way back and give them the support and the resources they need to do that?
It was actually this very room that I was in years ago, my first clemency meeting, that really inspired me to take a journey of really helping to figure out how I can be helpful and how I can tell the amazing stories that I would hear from the success stories from individuals like yourself.
But our story is not just about prison reform. It's about influencers like Kim. She mentions her first clemency meeting during the Trump administration when she was a regular fix at the White House. She partnered with Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, and they worked on cases that needed a pardon. In 2020, Kim Kardashian spoke in support of Trump and his reform, but soon that relationship soured. This is a post from 2023. Trump took to Truth Social and he called Kim Kardashian the world's most overrated celebrity. Kim never said who she voted for in 2020, but it no longer matters, really. This is election year in America, and Kim Kardashian is an asset. The Biden camp knows that, hence the round table with the vice president. Earlier this week, Biden granted clemency to 16 non-violent drug offenders. He pardoned them. Chances are you did not see that headline, but when Kim Kardashian talks about it, you notice. That's the power of social media influencers. They have the reach, they can sway public opinion, and that means they can also influence policies. The Biden administration knows that. They have 4 digital staffers with one job, reaching out to influencers and content creators. Ahead of Joe Biden's State of the Union this year, the White House hosted 70 of them, 70, creators, digital publishers, and influencers with around 100 million followers. Last year, LGBTQ influencers were invited to celebrate same-sex marriage. In fact, Biden took it one step further. He was at the Detroit Auto Show. It was supposed to be about cars. Instead, it became about this viral video.
Hey, excuse me. Your car is awesome. What do you do for a living?
Well, I'm married to Jill Biden, and I make sure we're making a lot more electric vehicles in America.
Oh, that's amazing. What kind of car is this?
It's a Cadillac.
Okay. And an electric vehicle at that.
That's exactly right, and it's quick.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much.
If you want to get in the back and come ride with me. But I'm going all the way to Washington here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, man. See you guys. But I want to go to Washington.
That's not all. The White House is contemplating a briefing room for influencers. Imagine that. And this is not unique to America, really. It's happening all over the world. Davos, that's the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum. COP, that's the United Nations Climate Summit. G20, influencers are everywhere. In India, they are the new stars. India has around 462 million social media users. Most of them follow at least one influencer. So the issues they take up become the talk of the town. Political parties use them to spread their message. So do other bodies. Take the Election Commission, for example. It is using influencers to ask people to vote. It shows you the power they hold. Influencers have a large following. They've earned the trust of their followers. It's called source credibility. The theory is about how information from particular sources can influence acceptance. And we saw it during the Wuhan virus pandemic. People were skeptical about vaccines, but when their favorite influencers endorsed them, there was wider acceptance. It's all about trust, really. And that's why influencers are a hot favorite. People may not trust politicians, but they trust influencers. And with that power comes great responsibility. Our next story comes from the world of AI, that is artificial intelligence, and it's going to sound like a dystopian nightmare. Because we regret to inform you, but AI beauty pageants are a thing now. We're talking about Miss AI, the world's first artificial intelligence beauty pageant where AI-generated virtual models will compete against each other. So what will be the parameters? Who will be the judge? We'll discuss that. Also, what is the purpose of this contest? After all, beauty pageants are regressive and demeaning. Add AI to the mix. And will the problems only get worse? Here's our report.
Can artificial intelligence cure cancer? Can AI prevent the next pandemic? Can it unlock world peace? Since AI took the world by storm, many have wondered about its potential. Humans have made big requests, and AI is still working on them. But what we never asked for was this: rating and ranking women, pushing impossible beauty standards and upholding banal and demeaning traditions like beauty pageants that stand for abuse and misogyny. But no shocker, AI is already doing all of this and more. Case in point, Miss AI. This is the world's first artificial intelligence beauty pageant. It has been launched by a content creator platform. The pageant will sort through and rank virtual models. These will be AI-generated pictures of women. One of them will be crowned Miss AI. And the winner, in this case the creator of the image, will get a cash prize. How much? About $8,000. And how will Miss AI be chosen? On the basis of looks, obviously. Additionally, the judges will also look at the implementation of AI tools, the social media clout of these virtual models, for instance, their number of followers, and the so-called personality of these AI-generated women. The participants will be answering a series of questions, including what would be your one dream to make the world a better place? And who will be judging the participants? 2 humans and 2 AI models, Aitana Lopez and Emily Pellegrini. Pellegrini was designed by an anonymous creator. They asked ChatGPT what the average man's dream girl is, and the model was designed along those lines. Meanwhile, Lopez was billed as Spain's first AI model. Its creator has been criticized for sexualizing Lopez's image. Their response? If we don't follow this aesthetic, brands won't be interested. The world in general is sexualized. What an appealing response. You see, beauty pageants are retrograde. This year, Miss Japan gave up her crown after revelations about an affair. Miss France was violently criticized for her short hair. And in 2018, Miss Ukraine was disqualified because officials found out that she was a divorced mother. That's not all. Beauty contests are also abusive. In 2023, Miss Universe Indonesia contestants filed police complaints over sexual harassment. At least 5 participants were asked to strip down to their undergarments. Beauty pageants should have no place in our present, let alone the future. But clearly, they are already preparing for it. They are evolving with AI. As if unrealistic beauty standards were not enough, we now have computer-generated so-called perfection. For instance, in 2016, a beauty contest was judged by AI, and it didn't like the participants with dark skin. Also, why only Miss AI? Even though both are problematic, where is the Mr. AI contest? So, if we were asked this question, what would be your one dream to make the world a better place? The answer would be quit the antiquated, toxic stunt of beauty pageants and keep AI out of it.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In California, a historic pier erupted in flames. In Brazil, thousands of indigenous demonstrators protested against the government over alleged failure to protect their ancestral lands. In Japan, transformer-like robots, drones and flying taxis delighted children. And finally, we are taking you back in history. On this day in 1986, the worst nuclear accident in history unfolded, the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. It took place in what is now northern Ukraine. The nuclear explosion discharged radioactive substances into the atmosphere. At least 30 people died. We're leaving you with that. Thanks for watching. Have a good weekend.
As Israel's war in Gaza unfolds, analysts are increasingly fearful of the West Asian conflict spilling over. And earlier this month, the 6-month war saw its biggest escalation ever. Iran and Israel attacked each other directly for the first time. On April 13th, Iran fired a barrage of missiles and drones towards Israel. This was in retaliation to the alleged Israeli attack on Tehran's consulate in Syria. And Israel responded with another set of airstrikes, pushing West Asia to the brink. This tit-for-tat approach led to many global leaders raising alarms.
Madam President, the Middle East is on the brink. The people of the region are confronting a real danger of a devastating, full-scale conflict. Now is the time to defuse and de-escalate. Now is the time for maximum restraint.
Now, while people in West Asia face threats of violence and destruction, other parts of the world are bracing for the war's impact on their pockets. West Asia is a crucial region. This is for two primary reasons: oil and shipping routes. West Asia is the world's primary source of fossil fuels. It accounts for 1/3 of the world's total crude oil output. The region is home to 5 of the world's top 10 oil producers, including Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Iraq, Iran, and Kuwait. Any disruption in the region impacts the supply of oil, which can lead to drastic changes in oil prices. And this is what happened last week. After Israel's attack on Iran, oil prices spiked by over 4%. The price of 1 barrel of crude oil reached nearly $90. Market analysts speculate that if the war escalates further, prices will likely touch $100. Oil and gas are just one part of the problem, though. West Asia connects Asia and Europe through land and sea. A large part of the world's cargo passes through this region. The Red Sea and the Strait of Hormuz are two of the most crucial trade routes. Around 12% of the world's shipping cargo passes through the Red Sea, and any disruptions to these routes is a significant red flag. In November last year, the Yemen-based Houthis hijacked a commercial ship in the Red Sea. Continuous attacks by the Iran-backed rebels posed a massive threat to shipping firms. It forced ships to change their routes. This, in turn, increased their journey time by up to 2 weeks, which further impacted the cost of goods being transported by these ships.
So if you have systematically higher shipping costs for manufactured goods, the consumer goods that you and I buy in the shop, it takes many months to really translate into higher prices. But it will come. So if this situation continues, it will have a bearing also on the prices we pay in the shop for our consumer goods.
In a report last year, the World Bank painted a grim picture of the impact of escalating tensions in West Asia. It said that a continued rise in oil prices could push food prices higher. That's because of an increase in production and transportation costs. It also flagged concerns of food insecurity in some regions. Following the war in Gaza, the average global price of wheat rose by $6 per metric ton in October 2023. In the same period, the price of maize also increased by $7. Meanwhile, the prices of crucial fertilizers climbed by up to $10. While prices of commodities rose over threats to their supply, gold also went on an upward trajectory, but for different reasons. Gold is often seen as a safe haven investment during times of uncertainty, and as the West Asian crisis unfolded, people rushed to secure their investments with gold. Now, a new escalation in the war is expected to further push these prices higher, and all of this is likely to severely impact our pockets, raising the cost of all essential goods like food and fuel. In fact, the International Monetary Fund has also warned against the risk of rising inflation due to tensions in West Asia.
We looked at a scenario where we would have more geopolitical tensions that would result in elevated oil prices, energy prices, and shipping costs. And what we find is that this would lead to higher price pressures in the global economy. There would be higher inflation, there would be lower output, and roughly the estimates we have for a sustained increase in oil prices by about 15% would be an increase in inflation globally of about 0.7%.